Today, we're diving into an era that pretty much laid the foundation for modern India, the Vedic Age. It's a period that shaped philosophies and traditions that are still alive today. And believe it or not, it all starts with a really simple, kind of strange question.
Just think about that for a second. Imagine a world where your entire net worth, your entire status, could be counted on 4 legs just chewing grass, where the most valuable thing you could possibly own was a herd of cows. This isn't some fantasy world. For the people of the early Vedic Age, this was reality.
So who exactly were these people? To really get a grip on their world, we first have to understand where and when they lived, and how their entire world expanded over almost 1,000 years.
Okay, so the Vedic Age isn't just one big block of time. It's really split into 2 main phases. The story kicks off around 1500 BCE in a region called Sapta Sindhu. That's basically parts of modern-day Afghanistan and Punjab. But then, right around 1000 BCE, a huge shift happens. People start moving east, pushing deep into the super fertile Gangetic plains. And that move, it sets the stage for some massive social and political changes.
You see, this big move wasn't just about changing their address. It completely reshaped their society. It's a fascinating story of how a pretty mobile, cattle-herding community turned into a complex, settled, and very strictly organized society.
Back in those early days, in the Rig Vedic period, everything, status, power, prosperity, the whole shebang, it all revolved around a single, absolutely vital asset. It was the measure of, well, everything.
And yup, that asset was cows. Cattle were the engine of their entire economy. They gave milk, they were used for farming, and they literally represented a family's fortune. It was simple. The more cows you had, the more important you were. End of story.
And this connection was so incredibly deep, it was baked right into their language. Think about this. Their conflicts weren't really about territory. The source material tells us that their word for war, gavasti, literally translates to a search for cows. Raids were launched not to conquer land, but to steal cattle from the neighboring tribes.
But things change, right? As people began to settle down in those Gangetic plains and life got more complicated, this simple way of measuring wealth started to change too. In its place, a new, much more rigid social hierarchy started to form, one they believed had divine origins. And this was the Varna system. At the very top, you had the Brahmins, the priests and the scholars who held all the sacred knowledge. Right below them were the Kshatriyas, the warriors and rulers who defended the people. Then came the Vaishyas, who were the farmers and the merchants, and at the bottom of the ladder were the Shudras, who served the other 3 groups. Now, this structure was rooted in their religion, for sure, but it also had a really practical purpose. It created a predictable social order by giving everyone a defined role in a much more complicated world.
So society is changing, but that's not all. Their politics went through a massive overhaul too. The idea of a leader transformed from, a simple tribal chieftain into something way more powerful, a king. Let's take a look at how that happened.
And this just lays it out so clearly. On one hand, you have the early Rig Vedic leader, the Rajan. He was basically a first among equals. His power was kept in check by tribal councils, and people gave him voluntary gifts. But the later Vedic king? Whoa, totally different ballgame. He claimed to have divine status, those assemblies lost all their power, he started collecting formal taxes, and he wasn't just leading a tribe anymore, he was ruling over a specific territory, a kingdom.
So we've talked society, we've talked politics, but what did these people actually believe in? Well, their religion was completely intertwined with the world around them, a world full of powerful and often unpredictable natural forces.
You see, the Vedic people didn't see nature as just scenery. To them, it was alive. It was buzzing with divine power. The rain, the fire, the wind, the sun, these weren't just things. They were powerful gods. And they organized this divine world into 3 main zones: the sky, the earth, and the space in between.
And at the top of the pyramid, the king of their gods was Indra. He was this mighty warrior who led them in battle, armed with a thunderbolt. And, as the god of rain, he was absolutely essential for their survival as farmers. There are over 250 hymns dedicated just to him in the Rig Veda. That tells you how important he was.
Next up in the VIP list was Agni, the god of fire. But he was so much more than that. Think of him as the divine messenger, like a cosmic delivery service. People would place their sacrifices and offerings into the sacred fire, and Agni would carry them up through the smoke to the other gods in the heavens. He was the crucial link between humans and the divine.
And finally, there's Soma, which is a really unique and interesting concept. Soma was both a god and a mysterious, probably hallucinogenic drink made from a special plant. When they drank it during rituals, they believed it gave them a direct line to the divine, a way to experience the gods firsthand. So, you can imagine, it was a central part of their most sacred ceremonies.
So, the Vedic Age officially ends around 600 BCE, but here's the thing, it didn't just vanish. Not at all. In fact, so many of its core ideas just flowed right into the cultures and religions that came next, shaping the Indian subcontinent in ways we can still see plain as day.
And seriously, you can see the fingerprints of this ancient world all over the place today. The Varna system, even though it changed a lot, laid the groundwork for the later caste system. The deep reverence for cows and for sacred rivers is still a huge cultural force. The Vedas themselves, they became the foundational text for Hinduism, and many of the hymns and fire rituals are still practiced.
And that really brings us to a final thought. When we look at modern India, at its philosophies, its traditions, its social fabric, we are, in so many ways, looking at the long, long shadow of the Vedic Age, a world that was built on cows and hymns, that grew into kingdoms and castes, and that, in some way, never truly went away.